So we're going to go ahead and do practice with our stem changers. So for example, in this activity, it says, Ana Maria y Antonio hacen planes. Antonio has invited his friend Ana Maria to visit him in Ciudad de Guatemala. Complete our explanation with the correct forms of logical verbs from the list. You may use some verbs more than once. Okay, so we've got costar, to cost, it's an O-D-U-E. Jugar, to play, U-D-U-E. Perder, to lose, E-I-E. Poder, can or to be able to, O-D-U-E. Entender, to understand, and E-I-E. Pensar, to think or to plan, E-I-E. Preferir, to prefer, E-I-E. And querer, to want or to love, E-I-E. So, in number 1, it says, Antonio y yo blank hacer planes para el viernes. Some of these you could use more than one, but it's like Antonio and I, we want to make plans. We're thinking about making plans for Friday. So probably either or would work. Let's go with, let's just go with querer, we want. Okay, now, in order to conjugate your verb, what you have to do is figure out who is the subject of your sentence. Who wants to make plans for Friday? When in Spanish, usually your subject comes before your verb in a statement, and it comes after your verb in a question. So since this is a statement, this is your subject. These are the people that want to make the plans. Antonio y yo. Well, Antonio y yo isn't in our chart, so we change it to a subject pronoun that is, so we can use our chart effectively. So Antonio and I want to make plans is the same thing as saying we want to make plans. Nosotros. Nosotros does fall in the black box. So what I'm going to do is I am not going to make my spelling change. I'm not going to change this E to an IE. I'm simply going to take my ER off. Here's querer. I'm going to get rid of my ER. And then this is an ER verb. So I'm going to use my ER endings over here. Here's nosotros. I'm going to use EMOS. Queremos. So Antonio y yo queremos hacer planes para el viernes. Nosotros blank ir al cine. We could say we want to go to the movies, or we're thinking about going to the movies, we're planning to go to the movies. Since we did want already, let's use a different verb. Let's use pensar. Okay. Pensar is an E to IE verb, but again, we have to look at who is it that's wanting or planning to go to the movies. It's us, nosotros, right? Because you look at who's the subjects before the verb. And nosotros falls in the green box, so I am not going to make the E to IE spelling change. I'm just going to get rid of my AR. And then for nosotros, this is an AR verb, I'm going to add AMOS. Pensamos. Nosotros pensamos ir al cine. Antonio ver una película nueva del Salvador que se llama Sobreviviendo Guasapá. Okay. So maybe Antonio wants to see the new film, film from El Salvador. So again, that's querer. Okay. So who wants to see this film this time? It's Antonio. Antonio's on our chart, but I could say Antonio wants or he wants. He is él. So we think of Antonio as él. If we're using él, we are outside the green box. So I am going to make my spelling change. I'm going to get rid of my ER, and I'm going to change my E to an IE, because if you look up here for querer, it's an IE stem changer. Okay. And then for he, this is an ER verb. I go over to my ER endings right here. I go up to L, I would add an E. Antonio quiere ver una película nueva del Salvador que se llama Sobreviviendo Guasapá. Yo las películas francesas. Okay, so this is a film from El Salvador, but I maybe prefer French films, so I'm going to put in preferir. Okay, who's doing the preferring? I am. If you look up here, I is outside the green box. So I get rid of my ending, and I am this time, and for preferir, it's the second E that changes. I am going to have to change that E to an IE. And then for an IR verb, I add the O. Yo prefiero las películas francesas, pero Antonio no blank francés. Well, the problem would be that he doesn't understand French. He can't go if he doesn't understand. Entender. Okay. Who is it that doesn't understand French? Antonio or he. He is outside of the green box. So I am going to make the spelling change. I'm going to go over here and change my E to an IE. And for he, this is an ER verb. I'm going to go up here for he and I add an E. Okay. Su madre que debemos jugar al tenis. So his mom maybe thinks that we should play tennis, which is pensar. So who thinks that we should play tennis, his mother or her? Again, she is outside the green box, so I am going to make my spelling change. I'm going to get rid of my ending. I'm going to change my E to an IE, and I'm going to add an, for she, I'm going to add an A. Antonio blank jugar al tenis, pero yo no muy bien. Maybe Antonio can play tennis. Poder. Who is it that can play tennis? It's Antonio or he. That's outside the green box, so I'm going to make the spelling change. I'm going to get rid of my ending. Poder is an O to UE, so I'm going to change that O to a UE. And then for he, if it's an ER verb, I'm going to add an E. Antonio puede jugar al tenis, pero yo no muy bien. But I don't play very well. Jugar. Who doesn't play very well? I don't. That's outside the green box again. So I'm going to get rid of the ending and I'm going to change my U to a UE. And for I as an AR verb, I would add an O. A Antonio le gusta jugar conmigo porque yo siempre, so he's going to like to play with me. If I don't play well, I'm probably always going to lose. Again, who's losing? I am. That's how I is outside the green box. So I'm going to make the spelling change. So that E is going to become an IE. And for I, and perder is an ER verb. For I, I'm going to add an O. También hay un concierto de música hondureña el viernes, pero los boletos blank mucho. The tickets would probably cost a lot. What cost a lot? The tickets, or they cost a lot. Whenever it's an inanimate object, you have to think of them as he's and she's. So it would be ellos in this case. I'm going to take the AR off because ellos does fall outside the green box. I'm going to make my spelling change. If you go up here, costar is an O to UE. I'm going to change that O to UE. And for they, for AR, I'm going to